Concepts. There are three topic areas we'll be discussing here. The difference between IT, Information Technology, and IACS, Industrial Automation and Control Systems. Defense in depth, and security zones and conduits. These concepts are all found in 62443-1-1. There are important differences between IT and IACS. Our problems occur because assumptions that are valid in IT may not be valid on a plant floor and vice versa. One of the key differentiators is that IACS cybersecurity has to address issues of health, safety, and environment, HSE. The 62443-1-1 introduction on page 14 states that because mutual understanding and cooperation between information technology, IT, and operations, engineering, and manufacturing organizations is important for the overall success of any security initiative. This standard is also a reference for those responsible for the integration of industrial automation and control systems and enterprise networks. Understanding the different needs of the staff leads to cooperation and collaboration between historically disconnected camps. The manufacturing organization, the information technology, the physical security, it's all important for the overall success of any security initiative within a company. We want all stakeholders that are responsible for the integration of industrial automation and control systems and enterprise networks to be able to use these standards and incorporate what works for them. Refer to the text in ANSI ISA 62443-1-1, Subclause 5.2, Security Objectives, on page 36. We want you to be familiar with the standards and begin to reference information. This may also help reinforce your learning prior to sitting for the certificate exam. Please open the note set and find the reference. Information security typically includes three properties: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which are often abbreviated by the acronym CIA and depicted as a triangle. An information technology security strategy for typical back office or administrative systems may place the primary focus on confidentiality and the necessary access controls needed to achieve it. Integrity might fall into the second priority, with availability as the lowest. In the industrial automation and control systems environment, there is generally an inversion of these properties, with availability and integrity more important to IACS. Protecting proprietary batch processes and recipes may take higher precedence. Security in these systems is primarily concerned with maintaining the availability of all system components. Integrity is important. For example, you want to know what those tank levels are. If it says it's at 50%, it's at 50%. If the values are available but they are not correct, that can make for a bad day. There are inherent risks associated with industrial machinery that is controlled, monitored, or otherwise affected by industrial automation and control systems. Usually, confidentiality is of lesser importance in the IACS environment because often the data is raw in form and must be analyzed within context to have any value. We have different performance requirements between the information technology and the industrial automation control system side, or OT, operations technology. In IT, responses must be reliable and have high throughput. Delay and jitter are tolerated in communications. Emergency interactions are less critical in an IT environment. There are IT-specific protocols in use. On the control side, response time is critical, and modest throughput is acceptable. High delay is a very serious concern. When we turn a valve on, we want to get the reply that the valve is on within a certain number of milliseconds, microseconds in some cases. Of course, the response to emergencies is critical with IACS. IACS uses both IT and industrial protocols. There may be specific industrial protocols that could be vendor-specific or proprietary. It's difficult to use business-level type switches and network design in the control system world. Those are some of the issues that come up when we're working with IACS networks. The availability requirements for IT and IACS are also different. The IT side has a scheduled operation, which is typically a business work week, 9 to 5, with call-out available. Occasional failures may be tolerated, rebooting could be tolerated, and beta testing in the field may be acceptable. Modifications may be possible with little paperwork. Then, on the IACS side, we have a continuous operation. It's not a business work week, it's continuous 24/7. Outages are intolerable because the money stops coming in when you can't make the product. Rebooting may not be acceptable, but may be the only alternative. And thorough quality assurance testing is expected in a non-production environment before you put anything out. Health, safety, and environmental (HSE) must be taken into consideration. All stakeholders have to understand these reliability impacts that affect both sides. Having occasional failures tolerated, this would apply to IT as well as IACS. If you're using email for alarming and notifications, and the email server goes down, what's the uptime for that? What is the guaranteed service level agreement? What is the guaranteed delivery of email? We see email being used a lot for alarming nowadays. What if the email server goes down? Where do you get your alarms from? IT and OT have to work together. Technology is how we are all connected, whether we like it or not. There are different operating environments. On the IT side, we have Office applications and standard operating systems. Microsoft operating systems, OS. Upgrades and updates are usually straightforward. Technology is refreshed and commercial off-the-shelf, COTS, pushed out every 3 to 5 years. You're going to see some legacy equipment on the IT side that's been there for a while, but generally 3 to 5 years they're replacing it. They have a cycle. Their vendors have a hard end-of-life cycle for software and hardware. It's the cost of doing business. It's more efficient to keep the hardware and software updated than trying to fix issues for hundreds or thousands of users every day. The IT department is usually located in a data center, server rooms, and/or office environments. On the IACS side, we have special applications and special embedded operating systems like WinCE, RTOS, and VxWorks. Upgrades are challenging. It's going to affect the hardware, logic, and graphics. Legacy systems. Does anybody have 15 to 20-year-old systems out there? Legacy systems are quite common in IACS environments. The resources for IACS are constrained. There's limited bandwidth. It never really needed a lot before, but now we're starting to put COTS equipment, commercial off-the-shelf equipment out there. Some of these devices are bandwidth hogs. Now we have IoT and IIoT to contend with. An industrial environment can be harsh. For example, those who have worked in a coal-fire facility know how dirty coal dust makes everything, and the air filters are continuously clogged up. Or if you're in a type of chemical environment, a chlorine environment, your typical office supply copper wire RJ45 connectors don't last long in a harsh environment. Let's look at a few more differences between IT and IACS. These are related to risk management goals. Data confidentiality and integrity is paramount on the IT side. Risk impacts include loss of data and/or a delay in business operations. It costs a lot of money to get rid of ransomware on the corporate side. Recovery by reboots might work in IT. Sometimes you can go ahead and get back up quickly. What is the business recovery time objective, or RTO? The acceptable downtime for critical functions and components, i.e. the maximum time it should take to restore services before the business has to close its doors and maybe declare bankruptcy. What is the recovery point objective, RPO? The point to which your state of operations must be restored following a disruption. In relation to backup data, this is the oldest age and level of staleness it can have. Is 1 hour ago good enough? How many online orders and payments has the business lost? In the control system world, HSE, health, safety, and environment are paramount. Integrity and availability are up there in importance. Risk impact can be loss of life, equipment, or a product. Fault tolerance is essential. You must have backup systems ready to go. Consider how following a typical IT risk management policy for password lockout procedures could lead to a potentially disastrous result if applied in an IACS environment. IT may lock out all access for 10 minutes after 3 failed login attempts. On the control system side, we want to make operator access easy and foolproof, but we also want to be secure. So, how do we handle that? What if an operator panics during a chlorine leak and misspells his password 3 times? The HMI locks all access for 10 minutes. That outcome can be disastrous. Applying IT security measures in an IACS environment doesn't always work. You need to take that into consideration. How do we address all these differences? Don't throw out all the IT security technologies and practices and start from scratch. About 90% of it can be repurposed and used. Take advantage of their expertise. Borrow from those IT security technologies and practices, modify them, and learn how to use them properly. They use technologies like Windows, TCP/IP, and Ethernet. So do we. Much of that IT policy and technology will work for control systems. Keep in mind, they don't deal in safety, but only security. Consider taking your IT experts on a field trip, educate them, and maybe go visit their data centers if they let you. Go check in with them. Develop a clear understanding of how the IACS assumptions and needs differ from the IT environment. Identify and address the 10% that may be different. A simple acronym like RAS can become a friction point. What does it stand for? Remedial Action Scheme or Remote Access Systems. These are two different technologies. Remedial action schemes have to do with industrial control systems or electric substations relay protection. For IT, RAS is Remote Access Systems. If you say RAS to IT, they're not thinking about relays. And then consider CIA. What comes first, availability or confidentiality? You can learn more about the important differences between IT and IACS by clicking the box below. There's a good reference article from ISA's blog. Note that the authors use the term ICS versus IACS. For our purposes, we'll consider the terms one and the same. Switching topics here, let's talk about defense in depth. Perimeter defenses are never enough. Eventually, the bad guys, the hackers, the bad actors are going to get in. Many times, it's not if you're going to get breached, it's when you were breached. A lot of breaches are discovered about 26 to 30 months after the initial probing by the adversary. They've been spending all that time getting the lay of the land, scoping out your systems at their leisure. You can't just firewall and forget about security. You'll find that it isn't the best procedure when the law enforcement authorities or government agencies knock on your door and they go, "Hey, we're finding your IP addresses and intellectual property out there on the internet. It looks like somebody might be doing some bad things with them. You might want to check that out." All of this security takes care and feeding. You put it out there, somebody's got to take care of it, and it costs money. Are there the resources, the financial resources, the business resources, and the management support to fund all of this? You must harden the control systems network. You may not be able to do a lot. You're going to have to work with the vendor, so that defense in depth is important. Detection in depth is paramount to timely incident response. It's got to be accountable. Detection without response is totally useless. Defense in depth is the provisioning of multiple security protections, especially in layers, with the intent to delay, if not prevent, an attack. Defense in depth implies layers of security and detection even on single systems, and provides the following features. Attackers are faced with breaking through or bypassing each layer without being detected. A flaw in one layer can be mitigated by capabilities in other layers. System security becomes a set of layers within the overall network security. Considering that security is not a perfect circle, it may require more emphasis on one layer versus another layer for a particular process. In this perfect circle diagram, there's no intent to imply an order for countermeasures. For example, policies and procedures may be required before physical security can be assessed. What about detection in depth? There should be alarms, logs, and detection methods to identify unusual data transfer patterns. First, you need to know what's normal. If you don't create a baseline, you have no way to know what's unusual. You may notice bursts of traffic, unusual protocols, and out-of-time data traffic. Maybe there are unknown, unexpected addresses, MAC addresses, IP addresses, media access control, internet protocol addresses, physical addresses, as well as logical ones. So there needs to be a way to turn on some type of system logging that operates on port 514. You can send these logs to a central logging server the same way IT does. A lot of control system equipment does have that capability now, but it needs to be configured. You must send them to the backup log server just in case a rogue insider knows about this and says, "Hey, I'm just going to wipe all these logs." So have a place where you're going to keep pertinent logs. It may be difficult to log everything, but you can log quite a bit in text format. If you're collecting this information, that could be helpful. Log services are turned off by default. Windows Security Log Service is one of those that by default in the past, straight out of the box, you fire it up and logging is turned off. You must actually go in there and consciously turn it on. Patch management and antivirus should be reporting devices that are out of date. So, you see how this helps our defense in depth approach? Firewalls and intrusion detection systems, IDS, should be configured to identify any traffic that is not part of the expected traffic across zones. Cyber risk. You can't have a cybersecurity course without having a risk equation. There have been papers, theses, and dissertations written on this risk equation. The one that the 62443 standards allude to is 3 factors: threat, vulnerability, and consequence. You will need to establish values to these depending on the approach that you use with it. Generally, you do that using a bunch of matrices with references such as high, medium, and low. There's no one set form of risk response. We'll discuss the risk equation in an upcoming module. In this course, we'll consider 5 risk responses. Design the risk out. One form of mitigation is to change the design of the system so that the risk is removed. Reduce the risk to an acceptable level through the implementation of countermeasures that reduce the likelihood or consequence of an attack. The key here is to achieve a level of good enough security, not to eliminate the risk. Accept the risk. There may be an option to accept the risk, to see it as the cost of doing business. Organizations must take some risks, and they cannot always be cost-effectively mitigated or transferred. Transfer or share the risk. It may be possible to establish some sort of insurance or agreement that transfers some or all of the risk to a third entity. A typical example of this is the outsourcing of specific functions or services. This approach cannot always be effective because it may not cover all assets completely. An insurance policy can recover certain damages, but not loss of customer confidence. Eliminate or redesign redundant or ineffective controls. A good risk assessment process will identify the types of controls that need to be addressed. You are the fact finder reporting to management using a good risk assessment process that will identify types of controls that need to be addressed. Your job is very important. Ultimately, it is the management's responsibility to determine the level of risk the organization is willing to tolerate. In this module, Introduction to Control System Security, we covered a lot of topics. In defining control system security, we used the terms electronic security, control system, and cybersecurity. We looked at trends, what are the businesses seeing out there, what's really happening in the outside world, what are the implications, the potential consequences that may include equipment damage, personal injury, or violation of legal and regulatory requirements. We looked at malware events and trends. Malware knows no borders. We discussed common myths regarding IACS security. We don't connect to the internet. Our facility's not a target. Our control systems are behind a firewall. Our safety systems are protected. And hackers don't understand control systems. Hopefully, this has given you a good foundation to build upon in the following modules of the course. Students often look for additional resources and networking opportunities. In response, ISA has created a virtual community designed to enhance your learning experience through ISA Connect. This is your opportunity to collaborate with your peers, benefit from their experience, and engage in technical conversations relating to securing IACS systems and ISA IEC 62443. Participation in the learning community is voluntary and requires an active ISA membership and enrollment in any IC32 course. You'll have access for 1 year. IC32 students without an ISA membership may join ISA and we will add you to the community. ISA Connect's cybersecurity learning community will help you build professional resources and contacts through discussion boards, library content, shared contacts, and more. It's important to note that the ISA Connect cybersecurity learning community is not to be used for sharing certificate exam details or questions. Exam specifics, including questions, should not be posted, shared, or discussed.